This is a video on the possessions of the British Empire in the African continent from the beginning to present. I can't claim to know everything, but here's what I found. Starting off the video, the area of the Gambia Colony and Protectorate was bought in 1588 from the claimant to the Portuguese throne Antonio, who was maybe king for 33 days. The legality isn't fully known, but Britain got it anyways. In the following 1651, Britain sold the same possession to the Duchy of Courland and Semigalia. In 1657, the East India Company was chartered to oversee the island of St. Helena. In 1660, the Royal African Company was chartered to manage some forts in the Gold Coast. In 1661, Tangier was given to Britain as a wedding dowry. However, this proved to be troublesome. In 1663, the Earl of Peterborough bought off the leader of a religious order who went on a crusade in the town. The area of the Gambia Colony and Protectorate was ceded back to Britain by the Duchy of Courland and Semigalia in 1664. Back to Tangier, the treaty made with the religious order was broken in 1664, and the Earl of Tavoy with about 470 men were killed. However, a treaty was once again made in 1666. Moving away for a moment, St. Helena has just been invaded by the Dutch in 1673, only for a few months though. Back again to Tangier, the treaty was once again broken in 1673, but in 1679 Morocco tried to seize the town, and finally in 1680 the British government decided to give up the town. However, this wouldn't be done until 1684 when the British spent 5 months destroying everything they could before finally evacuating. Jumping just a few years, ownership of the now bankrupt Royal African Company were turned over to the African Company of Merchants in 1752. The French tried taking Gambia in 1758, but that was stopped. However, in the same year, Britain occupied France's Gorée and Senegal possessions during the 7 Years' War. At the end of the war, the 1763 Treaty of Paris had Britain give back Gorée, but Senegal was made a crown colony. This didn't last long though, since Britain once again occupied Gorée in 1779. It didn't give it back until 1783 at a different Treaty of Paris. Also in 1783, France gave up their claim to Gambia, although not the enclave of Albreda. However, Britain had to give up their claim to Senegal. In 1787, Granville Town was organized and used for British settlement. In 1794, the French invaded the Dutch United East India Company possessions in southern Africa in the area that would eventually become the Cape Colony. However, in the following 1795, the British took over the same possessions to use against the French. Also in 1795, Walvis Bay, sometimes called Wallfish Bay, was occupied. The Dutch United East India Company was supposed to receive Dutch reinforcements to fight against the British occupation of southern Africa in 1796, but upon reinforcements seeing the massive British Navy, they surrendered and left without a fight. The area was then transferred to the Batavian Republic, a successor to the prior Netherlands form of government, before the company went bankrupt. Moving to the opposite end of the continent, the islet of Egypt was occupied by Britain after a French surrender in 1801. Gorée was also occupied for the third time in 1801. Britain finally gave up their claim to the southern part of Africa in 1802 and acceded it to the Batavian Republic in the Treaty of Amiens. Britain removed their troops from Egypt in 1803 as the Muhammad Ali dynasty rose to power. Gorée was captured by the French in January of 1804, but recaptured in March by the British. During the Napoleonic Wars in 1806, Britain took back southern Africa from the Batavian Republic. In 1808, the Sierra Leone colony was created. In 1809, Senegal was occupied again as a result of the Napoleonic Wars. Spain allowed Britain to occupy Ceuta in 1810 to fight the French. Reunion Island was also taken in 1810 from the French. In 1811, in southern Africa, Britain had started having issues with the native Xhosa tribes of the region, and in the later 1814, Britain was finally able to sign the Anglo-Dutch Treaty and receive the area of Cape Colony and establish their colony there. In the 1814 Treaty of Paris, France was given back Reunion Island. This did lead to Napoleon being exiled to St. Helena in 1815, which caused the island to be taken from the East India Company. As a result, Ascension Island was reinforced in the same year. The Royal Navy also designated Ascension as HMS Her Majesty's ship Ascension to be used as a stopping point for ships and communications. This was done since the Royal Navy technically couldn't own land, but they could apparently own a ship made of land. And lastly, in 1815, Ceuta was given back to Spain. Gorée and Senegal were also given back to France in 1816. Tristan da Cunha territory was annexed by Britain to prevent anyone from using it as a base to free Napoleon from St. Helena. Apologies to Go Island, which I accidentally cut off from the map. Lastly, in 1816, Cape Colony occupied the area between the Fish and Keiskamma rivers while fighting the Xhosa, but they then made the area neutral land with the Xhosa in 1817. The African Company of Merchants were dissolved in 1821, and control of the forts were transferred to Sierra Leone. Also, St. Helena was transferred back to the East India Company in the same year upon the death of Napoleon. The Ashanti Empire began taking over local areas and even killed an English general in 1824. Mombasa was made a protectorate in 1824 when it was taken from the Imamate of Oman. Then, it was returned to the Sultanate of Muscat and Oman in 1826. The British were also able to occupy the Ashanti Empire in 1826. In 1827, ports of the island of Bioko were leased from Spain for the African Slave Patrol. In 1830, the area of the Gold Coast was effectively made a protectorate when the president of a local council of merchants was charged with overseeing the area. In 1831, the occupation of the Ashanti Empire was ended with a treaty. In 1834, Cape Colony killed a high-ranking Xhosa chief and war broke out as a result. Also in the same year, St. Helena was made a crown colony. The Queen Adelaide province was annexed into Cape Colony in 1835, but was removed from Cape Colony in 1836 and renamed the Queen Adelaide District. Also, in 1836, Cape Colony signed a treaty giving them the neutral land previously created. However, the British government disliked this and forced the change to be undone. In 1843, the Gold Coast Protectorate had its first governor appointed. Also, the colony of Natal was created. In 1846, Cape Colony became involved in the War of the Axe. The war ended the following year, although Sir Harry Smith, the new governor, unilaterally expanded the borders of the colony and practically doubled its size. They missed a piece, though. Also, a piece next to Buchananland was annexed. As a note, this could have occurred between 1847 and 1850, but I think this is the most appropriate time to place it in here. Lastly, British Kaffraria was annexed into Cape Colony. In 1848, the Orange River Sovereignty was created and made a colony. In 1850, Cape Colony annexed the Wittenbergen Native Reserve. Also in that year, the Gold Coast Protectorate was bought from the Danish Gold Coast. The Orange Free State was renounced by Britain in 1854 because it was thought as not valuable. Bioko was returned to Spain in 1855. In 1856, fighting started between Basutoland and the Orange Free State. In the same year, Albreda inside of the Gambia was ceded to the British. In 1860, British Kaffraria was removed from the Cape Colony after the Great Xhosa cattle killing. In 1861, Lagos was annexed by the British after 11 days of siege and threats. The Penguin Islands were also annexed in the same year. Lagos became a crown colony in the following 1862. Gold was discovered in the Toddy concession lands in 1864. British Kaffraria was once again annexed to Cape Colony in 1866. In 1868, Basutoland was made a protectorate as a way of deterring the Orange Free State. They wanted to join Cape Colony, but was instead approved to join Natal. Basutoland ended up joining no one. In 1870, a concession was granted to the London and Limpopo Mining Company for mining in the Toddy concession lands. In 1871, Basutoland was finally annexed to the Cape Colony, as they wanted. In the same year, Griqualand West became administered by the British. In 1872, Cape Colony became self-governing. Also, the Gold Coast Protectorate was expanded by buying land from the Dutch Gold Coast. Also, the Penguin Islands were merged into Cape Colony. The Ashanti Empire was once again occupied in 1873. The following year, a peace treaty was signed and occupation ended. This allowed the British the upper hand in negotiating the borders of the new Gold Coast colony. Also in 1874, Griqualand East was created as a colony. In 1875, Tristan da Cunha territory was made a dependency of the crown. In 1877, the Transvaal colony was annexed because Britain saw an opportunity from the previous South African Republic's shaky financial position. In 1878, Walvis Bay was made a protectorate. In 1879, Cape Colony annexed Griqualand East. Also in the same year, the United African Company was chartered, and Zululand was invaded by the British. In 1880, Cape Colony annexed Griqualand West. In 1881, the Basuto Gun War led to a treaty and 5,000 cattle were given to Cape Colony in exchange. Also, the United African Company was renamed National African Company. The British were defeated in Transvaal, and the South African Republic came back to being in 1881. In 1882, the Khedivate of Egypt was occupied. This was done because unrest in the area made Britain want to ensure control of the Suez Canal, which is valuable to trade. In 1884, the colony of Basutoland was created when Cape Colony lost control of it. Also, a resident commissioner was appointed to the area of Buchananland, technically making it a protectorate. British Somaliland Protectorate was created when Britain signed protection agreements with Somali tribes. Also, Walvis Bay merged with Cape Colony. Stellaland was made a protectorate of the South African Republic, which upset Britain. The British ended up sending a force to Stellaland, which occupied and annexed the land in 1885. Also in 1885, the Buchananland Colony and Protectorate was established after unrest in portions of the area prompted Britain to act. Some of the population also sought protection from the Boers of the Transvaal. In the same year, Stellaland was incorporated into the colony. Lastly, in 1885, the Berlin Conference was held in which the carving of Africa occurred. In 1887, the Oil Rivers Protectorate was formed. Zululand was also made a colony. In 1888, the Imperial British East Africa Company was chartered. Gambia was made a colony in 1888, and its borders were formally set with France in 1889. Also, the Shire Highlands Protectorate was formed after a declaration by the deputy of a British consul. This was done in response to the Portuguese crossing a new river border. However, the British Foreign Office did not support the new protectorate. Also in 1889, Rhodesia had a company chartered to manage it. This became known as a period of company rule in Rhodesia. In 1890, the Buchananland Protectorate added Ngamaland in a manifest destiny style of land acquisition. They also traded away the Caprivi Strip, containing the Zambezi River, to Germany in exchange for Germany's recognition of a British protectorate over Zanzibar. Funnily enough, shortly after learning about the Zambezi, I was playing Trivial Pursuit with some friends and got asked, pictured here, what African river flows into the Victoria Falls? I knew this was the Zambezi. Interesting fact about that, Germany wanted the Caprivi Strip because it would give them access to trade via the Zambezi River. What Britain knew that Germany did not was that the Victoria Falls were large enough to prevent the trade from being possible. Also in 1890, the Lagos Protectorate was added to the already existing Lagos colony. The British South Africa Company was chartered to manage the area of Mashonaland. Meanwhile, the British East Africa Company was sent to occupy the area of Uganda and maintain peace in a civil war. Also, Britain made a protectorate with the permission of the Sultanate of Zanzibar, and they also made a treaty with Germany recognizing that protectorate. Fun fact about that, I didn't know that Zanzibar basically owned a major portion of Kenya for a while. Then, Britain came in and was like, that's cool, but we don't need that, and they took the inland portion of Kenya and left Zanzibar with the coast. But don't worry, Britain would eventually take the coast away from Zanzibar. Lastly, in 1890, the Shire Highlands Protectorate was renamed the Nyasaland Districts Protectorate after having the borders expanded. This was done via a British ultimatum against the Portuguese. Also, the ultimatum and expansion of the protectorate was not approved by the Crown, but occurred regardless. Although, the following year, Britain renamed it the British Central Africa Protectorate and made a treaty with the Portuguese to fix the southern borders. In 1891, the British also effectively made the Buchananland Protectorate a de facto colony when British officials were appointed to the local government. In the same year, Anglo-French surveyors were sent to Gambia to finalize its borders, but were forced away until Britain bombarded coastal lands so the natives would let them in. Also, Mashonaland and Matabeleland were made protectorates in 1891. In 1893, the British Central Africa Protectorate was established as the last of the resisting tribal chiefs were defeated by the end of the year. The Oil Rivers Protectorate was renamed the Niger Coast Protectorate and greatly expanded.
Mataba was separated from the Toddy concession lands. A revolt was also occurring at this time.
The rest of the Toddy concession lands were added as part of the Buchananland Protectorate. Lastly, in 1893, the British East Africa Company transferred their rights back to Britain and in a way created an implied protectorate where, at a minimum, Britain administered the lands. It didn't take long until 1894, though, when the Uganda Protectorate was officially established. In 1895, Amatongaland was made a protectorate by Britain to stop the Boer people from trying to take it. British Buchananland was merged into Cape Colony. Also, as a note, this extra flange, as I call it next to Cape Colony, is part of its borders. But, since Buchananland was merged with it, this seems the right year to add it to Cape Colony. I have found a map which mentioned this being part of British Buchananland, but there are also a lot of issues with maps agreeing with one another on whether this is part of Buchananland or Cape Colony or something else entirely before now. In either sense, in 1895, British Buchananland as well as this flange is now part of Cape Colony. The Imperial British East Africa Company went into bankruptcy, so Britain created the East Africa Protectorate over its lands. The area that used to be managed by a company is now just called Rhodesia. Lastly, in 1895, the South African Republic was occupied for the second time by Britain. In 1896, the Ashanti Empire was annexed after Britain invaded their lands and forced a treaty. Also, Mashonaland had another revolt. The Sierra Leone Colony and Protectorate now exists. Lastly, in 1896, the Sultanate of Zanzibar had their pro-British Sultan die and get replaced with one that didn't like Britain. In response to actions by the new Sultan, Britain bombed the Beit al-Hukum Palace, and a ceasefire was made in 38 minutes after the start of the bombing. This technically made the bombing the shortest war ever. In 1897, the northern territories of the Gold Coast were districted and included in British possessions after treaties were signed with tribal chiefs. Also, Amatongaland was annexed into Zululand. In the same year, Zululand, along with Amatongaland, was merged into Natal. In 1899, a condominium with Egypt was created to jointly manage the area called the Condominium of Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. Funnily enough, even though a condominium implies both parties have power, Britain could really have unilaterally done whatever they wanted. Finally, in the next century, the Ashanti Empire experienced a rebellion. The Niger Coast Protectorate was split into the Northern and Southern Nigeria Protectorates. This canceled the Royal Nigerian Company charter for the area. The Orange Free State was annexed in 1900 as well. In 1901, the Ashanti Empire was made into a colony. Also, Mataba and Mashonaland were merged into southern Rhodesia. Lastly, in 1901, the northern territories of the Gold Coast were formally established as a protectorate. In 1902, the boundaries of the East Africa Protectorate were expanded. The Orange Free State and Transvaal were each made into a colony at the end of the Second Boer War. Swaziland was also made into a protectorate. Lastly, in 1902, Uganda's border shrunk. However, in 1905, Uganda was made into a colony. In 1906, Lagos Colony and Protectorate was merged into the Southern Nigeria Protectorate. In 1907, the British Central Africa Protectorate was renamed the Nyasaland Protectorate. Also, the Orange River Colony and Transvaal Colony were granted responsible government and limited self-government, respectively. In 1910, the Cape Colony united with other colonies and territories to massively expand itself. This involved the Colony of Natal, Orange River Colony, and Transvaal Colony. Also, Uganda's borders shrunk again, but in 1912 they were expanded to include some land from the Lado enclave of the Congo Free State. World War I started in 1914, and along with it came many changes. First, the East Africa Protectorate had its boundaries expanded. Meanwhile, Uganda's had theirs shrink again. The Northern and Southern Nigeria Protectorates were merged into the Colony and Protectorate of Nigeria. Also, the Sultanate of Egypt was made a protectorate, and an Anglo-French condominium was established where Britain occupied the German Protectorate of Togoland. In 1915, the territory of Southwest Africa was occupied to take power away from Germany. In 1916, a portion of the Cameroons, which Germany originally had rights to, were occupied and called the British Cameroons. The British Togoland was split off from the larger Anglo-French condominium and became solely owned by Britain, while the remainder went to the French. Also in 1916, German East Africa was occupied. In 1918, World War I came to a close, but it would take until the next year for the consequences of this to be realized as far as international boundaries go. In 1919, the British Cameroons became the first League of Nations mandated territory for Britain to administer. In short, a mandate territory is a legal status where colonies and protectorates were taken from the Central Powers and administered by Allied powers. As a note, the two governing principles of the mandates are the non-annexation of the territory and its administration as a sacred trust of civilization to develop the territory for the benefit of its native people. Otherwise meaning, the mandates are meant to allow administered territories to grow and eventually take their own independence. The territory of Southwest Africa was also made a mandate territory administered by Britain. German East Africa was awarded to Britain during the 1919 Paris Peace Conference. Later in the same year, Britain gave the Rwanda and Urundu districts of the territory to Belgium since Belgium had previously had a presence in the region. The Kianga Triangle, which was the only point of the territory below the Rovuma River, was turned over to Portugal. In 1920, the lands were formally ceded by the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in the earlier 1919. Also in 1920, the colony and protectorate of Kenya was created from the East Africa Protectorate. The 10 miles closest to the coast from the Umba to Tana rivers were made the Protectorate of Kenya, while the remainder was the Colony of Kenya. The Protectorate encompassed the lands recognized as belonging to the Sultan of Zanzibar, but under protection of Britain. The Sultan did not accept the reduction in borders willingly. In 1922, Ascension Island became a dependency of St. Helena. Also, Tanganyika Territory and the newly renamed Mandate Territory of Togoland were both made Mandate Territories. The new Kingdom of Egypt was made technically independent, and Walvis Bay was transferred to the ownership of Southwest Africa. In 1923, the area of Southern Rhodesia had its company charter revoked and became directly managed by Britain. In the same year, Southern Rhodesia was granted responsible government and allowed to manage most of its internal affairs. In the following year, Northern Rhodesia was made a protectorate. Also in 1924, a demilitarized zone was established for Tangier, named the Tangier International Zone, and was a condominium of the UK, France, and Spain. This later included Portugal, the US, Italy, Belgium, Sweden, and the Netherlands. The condominium arose out of a border dispute that resulted in a demilitarization strategy. In 1926, the boundaries of the colony and protectorate of Kenya expanded. The expansion included the Elimni Triangle. This border is still ill-defined and has little value outside of some nomadic grazing lands. Sudan, presently South Sudan, and Kenya have repeatedly attempted to define a boundary, but between Kenya's lack of ambition to claim any overly significant amount of land and Sudan's numerous internal conflicts, there has been little change other than on paper. This has become a hotter topic in the last decade since South Sudan has less to deal with, but is still relatively insignificant. Also, Uganda once again shrunk. In 1931, the Union of South Africa became independent, but kept the Queen of England as head of state. In 1934, the Sahara Triangle was acceded to Italian Libya from the condominium of Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. In 1938, Tristan da Cunha territory was made a dependency of St. Helena. In 1939, World War II started.
In 1940, British Somaliland was occupied by the Italians.
Also, Tangier International Zone was occupied by the Spanish, citing a temporary measure, but everyone else knew this was BS. The Spanish had wanted it for a long time.
In 1941, Italian occupation of British Somaliland ended.
But Ethiopia was occupied by Britain as a method of protecting the country from Italian invasion. In 1942, Eritrea became administered by Britain following occupation of the area. This was also done for Italian protection. French Somaliland was occupied along with Free France to protect against occupation from Vichy France. The Sarentia and Tripolitania areas of Libya were taken over by Allied forces and administered by Britain. Lastly, in 1942, the Tristan da Cunha territory was designated HMS Atlantic Isle and classified as a stone frigate in the Royal Navy. It was set to be used as a place for signals intelligence and mostly to monitor U-boat communications. In 1943, French Somaliland was turned over completely to Free France. In 1944, Ethiopia was returned to Ethiopia via the Anglo-Ethiopian Agreement. However, the Ogaden area was kept by Britain. In 1945, World War II came to a close. This likely led the Spanish to finally end their occupation of the Tangier International Zone. In 1946, HMS Atlantic Frigate was decommissioned and remained to the Tristan da Cunha territory. Also, multiple mandate territories were turned over to the United Nations after the end of the League of Nations. This had little effect on the purpose and management of the mandates other than management by a different organization. British Cameroons, the newly named Trust Territory of Togoland, and the Tanganyika Territory were all turned over. However, the territory of Southwest Africa was kept in mandate status by South Africa. There was hope that Southwest Africa would become the fifth province of South Africa. In 1947, Italian forces were finally expelled from the Serinthia and Tripolitania areas of Libya. In 1948, the Ogaden area of Ethiopia was finally returned. However, in a classic British style, the Howd area was not returned. In 1950, the International Court of Justice ruled that South Africa does not have an obligation to convert the League of Nations mandate to United Nations Trust Territory, but that South Africa is still bound by the terms of the mandate pursuant to UN supervision. In 1951, the Serinthia and Tripolitania areas of Libya were given independence and made the Kingdom of Libya. After the Egyptian Revolution of 1952, Egypt pushed for the breakup of the Condominium of Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. As a mark of progress, the condominium was awarded self-rule, but not more than that. Also in 1952, the United Nations General Assembly decided that Eritrea no longer needed British protection and would become independent. In 1953, the Condominium of Anglo-Egyptian Sudan entered into an agreement that would grant independence to the condominium in 1956. Also, a coup occurring in Egypt during 1952 resulted in the overthrow of the British-backed monarchy. This created the Republic of Egypt in 1953 with true independence. Lastly, in 1953, Rhodesia and the British Central Africa Protectorate merged into the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. This did include a little border expansion. What else would Britain do but take over more? In 1954, the Colony and Protectorate of Nigeria was granted limited self-government to become the Federation of Nigeria. In 1955, the Howd area was finally returned to Ethiopia. It took Britain 11 years from the signing of the Anglo-Ethiopian Agreement to return all lands Ethiopia was entitled to. In 1956, Anglo-Egyptian Sudan was finally made independent as the Republic of Sudan. Also, the Tangier International Zone was dissolved and returned to Morocco. British Togoland voted to join the Gold Coast and the merger was completed. Lastly, in 1956, the last British troops left the Republic of Egypt in June. However, they came back in October for a week, which overlapped into November. This was because the UK believed that Egypt was going to close the canal. Egypt ended up sinking for the canal and caused its closure anyways. Additionally, it was later found out that Israel, Britain, and France conspired in planning out the invasion. The US warned Britain not to invade and threatened damage to Britain's financial system by selling the US's pound sterling bonds. Britain's role in the crisis is sometimes said to signify the end of Britain's role as one of the world's major powers. In 1957, the Federation of Nigeria was allowed self-government versus their previous limited self-government. Also in 1957, the Ashanti Empire, Gold Coast, and Northern Territories of the Gold Coast were merged into the Dominion of Ghana. In 1960, Tanganyika became self-governing. Also, British Somaliland became independent as the State of Somaliland, which joined with Italian Somaliland 5 days after its independence. The Dominion of Ghana became independent as the Republic of Ghana, and the Colony and Protectorate of Nigeria became independent as the First Nigerian Republic. In 1961, the northern British Cameroons merged with the First Nigerian Republic, while the southern portion merged with the Republic of Cameroon. These were decided by a plebiscite in each region. Also, the Union of South Africa became independent as the Republic of South Africa. Lastly, from 1961, the Sierra Leone Company and Protectorate became de facto independent as the Dominion of Sierra Leone. Tanganyika also became de facto independent as the Republic of Tanganyika. In 1962, the Republic of Tanganyika became fully independent after creating a new constitution. Also, Uganda was given self-government and renamed the Dominion of Uganda. In 1963, the Dominion of Kenya was created. This unilaterally absorbed the portion of Kenya owned by the Sultan of Zanzibar. Zanzibar did become independent from a British protectorate in the same year. Zanzibar then went on to join Tanganyika in the same year to create the United Republic of Tanganyika and Zanzibar. Gambia Colony and Protectorate was given self-rule. Also, the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland was dissolved into Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, and Nyasaland. Lastly, in 1963, the Dominion of Uganda became fully independent as the State of Uganda. In 1964, the Dominion of Kenya became fully independent as the Republic of Kenya. Also, Nyasaland became independent as the Republic of Malawi, and Northern Rhodesia became independent as Republic of Zambia. This caused Southern Rhodesia to be renamed Rhodesia. In 1965, the colony of Basutoland was made self-governing after High Commission arrangements were disbanded. The Buchananland Protectorate was also made self-governing after the High Commission arrangements were disbanded. The Gambia Colony and Protectorate became independent as the Gambia, and yes, the country name is not Gambia, but the Gambia. Lastly, in 1965, Rhodesia created a Universal Declaration of Independence, which lacked international recognition. In 1966, Basutoland became independent as Lesotho, and the Buchananland Protectorate became independent as the Republic of Botswana. In 1967, Swaziland became autonomous. In the following 1968, Swaziland became independent. In 1970, Rhodesia renamed itself the Republic of Rhodesia. This change was also unrecognized. In 1971, the Sierra Leone Colony and Protectorate became independent as the Republic of Sierra Leone. In 1979, the Republic of Rhodesia renamed itself Zimbabwe Rhodesia. However, this was about the same time Britain was disposing of Rhodesia. Therefore, Rhodesia and Britain signed an agreement called the Lancaster House Agreement. This made Zimbabwe Rhodesia temporarily back into Southern Rhodesia. This made Southern Rhodesia carry a weird classification called a Transitional Crown Colony. It's not necessarily technical, but I'm deriving its use from someone else, and it works in this context. Despite that, in the following 1980, Southern Rhodesia was made independent as the Republic of Zimbabwe. In 1981, St. Helena was reclassified as a British dependent territory. In 2002, St. Helena was reclassified as a British overseas territory. Lastly, in 2009, St. Helena, Ascension Island, and Tristan da Cunha territory were merged into the St. Helena, Ascension, and Tristan da Cunha British Overseas Territories. These are most technically considered devolved self-governing dependencies under a constitutional monarchy. They are the only possessions in the continent of Africa still remaining to Britain. I hope this video was entertaining in some variety and provided more info than anyone would care to know about the history of British possessions in the continent of Africa. Of course, I strive to make this video as historically accurate as possible, but I had a few barriers to my progress. Considering I could have not have lived simultaneously across a 500-year period in all these possessions, I derived my information mostly from maps, Wikipedia, JSTOR, and other scholarly sources, as well as whatever I could get my hands on. There is some natural variation in dates, maps, and boundaries, as well as other background info, and this is due to anything from maps are hand-drawn to dates could either go with the date a treaty was signed or when it actually went into effect. While I would stand by my work and say it is a good indicator of the British expansion and decline on the continent, I'm not sure I would stand here and say it is the most authoritative of any source. In any regard, thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video.